The Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway, almost always referred to as the S&amp, was an English railway line connecting Bath in northeast Somerset and Bournemouth, now in southeast Dorset but then in Hampshire, with a branch from Evercreech Junction to Burnham-on-Sea and Bridgwater. Strictly speaking, the main line ran from Bath Junction to Broadstone, as the line between Broadstone and Bournemouth was owned by the London and South Western Railway, while the line between Bath Junction and Bath was owned by the Midland Railway. It was never a high-speed line. Its winter business was carrying freight and local passenger traffic over the Mendips, but in the summer season the S&amp came into its own, carrying a heavy service of Saturday holiday trains from northern towns to Bournemouth. It was often referred to as the Slow and Dirty, or sometimes the Slow and Doubtful, but it always commanded a considerable loyalty from railway enthusiasts, and when it closed in 1966 it was widely mourned. Overview. The Somerset and Dorset Railway was created in 1862, as an amalgamation of the Somerset Central Railway and the Dorset Central Railway. By the following year, it ran from Burnham-on-Sea in Somerset to Wimborne in Dorset. From Wimborne, the S&amp trains could use a line owned by the London and South Western Railway to reach Hamworthy on the south coast. It was anticipated that substantial traffic would be attracted to this cross-country link between the Bristol Channel and the English Channel. When this failed to materialize, the company, which was already in dire financial straits, decided to gamble everything on one last desperate bid for increased traffic, and built an extension from Evercreech Junction to Bath to join up with the Midland Railway. This new line provided a through route with the Midlands and the north of England and the south coast. It managed to produce a substantial increase in traffic, but too late to save the company, which went into receivership, and in 1875 it became jointly owned by the Midland Railway and the S&amp SWR, upon which it was renamed the Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway. After the 1st of January 1923, grouping joint ownership of the S&amp DJR passed to the LMS and the Southern Railway. Its attractions were its quirky individuality, its varied scenery, and the way it seemed to struggle against overwhelming odds. Its main line climbed to 811 feet above sea level at Masbury, and it contained several single-line sections. But on summer Saturdays it managed to handle a considerable volume of holiday trains. When it seemed every possible locomotive was drafted into service to handle heavy trains requiring double-heading and banking over the steep gradients. Its origins lay in times before the railway network in England had settled, and both local and strategic aspirations structured the line's earliest days. Work has now started to restore some remnants of the S&amp DJR to working condition. The S&amp in the early 1960s. The fame of the Somerset and Dorset line reached its peak in the first years of the 1960s, just before final closure as part of the nationwide reduction of railway services, usually called the Beeching Axe. The main line was still active, carrying local passenger trains on a daily long-distance train, the Pines Express, from Manchester to Bournemouth West, reversing at Bath Green Park. Local freight on the route survived in adequate volumes, although the Somerset coalfield was largely exhausted and coal traffic had dwindled. On summer Saturdays, the line continued to carry a very heavy traffic of long-distance trains from northern towns to Bournemouth and back. It was part of the charm of the route that the originating towns were mostly on the former Midland Railway, as if the railway grouping of 1923 had never taken place. These trains brought unusual traffic combinations to the route, and the home fleet of BR Standard Class 5, 4, 6 OS and the BR Standard Class 9 F2 100S were augmented by strangers such as LMS Jubilee Class 460S for the north, though these didn't work over the S&amp D proper and West Country Pacifics from the south, as assistance over the steep gradients was usually required. The original S&amp D Class 7F28OS were pressed into service to assist or handling lighter trains on their own. The route remained steam-worked almost entirely until closure, though some diesel multiple units ran over the line on a couple of excursions only in the final years. After closure, diesels worked at demolition trains, and some diesel workings operated to Blandford Forum after the line had closed. Freight in the 1960s was largely in the hands of Fowler 4Fs, Stanier 8Fs, Standard 460S and the S&amp D7F28OS, assisted by Ginty 0 to 6-0 teraseconds and GW57XX pannier tanks. Freight trains were assisted in rear by these locomotives over the Combe Down Summit and over Masbury. The High Bridge branch trains were latterly worked by Collet 225106OS and Ivet 2MT2 to 6-2 teraseconds. Geography. The S&amp D main line ran south from Bath Queen Square to Radstock, at one time the centre of the Somerset coalfield, and then over Masbury Summit, at 811 feet above sea level, crossing the Mendips Hills, via Shepton Mallet and entering the catchment area of the River Stour to Wincanton and Blandford, joining the S&amp SWR Weymouth line at Poole. The S&amp D trains continuing to the S&amp SWR station at Bournemouth West. The branch line from High Bridge to Evercreech Junction had been the original main line. When attracting steamer traffic across the Bristol Channel had been an objective, it traversed an area of very low population density, and when the marine connection ceased, only Glastonbury and Street in the centre of the route contributed any worthwhile income. There had been other, shorter branches, but these too generated very little traffic, and they had all closed by the early 1950s, serving only a string of medium-sized market towns between its extremities. The S&amp D generated a modest internal traffic, and it had daunting operational costs due to the difficulty of its main line. Its strategic significance was the formation of a through route between the Midlands and the South Coast, by connecting with the Midland Railway at Bath. The Midland Railway linked Bath to Bristol and via Gloucester to Birmingham and north. Heavy summer holiday passenger traffic and healthy through freight business was the result, but the long and difficult main line was very expensive to support the business. There was only one intermediate connection on the route, at Templecombe railway station, where the Salisbury-Exeter route was crossed. There was an awkward layout there, requiring through trains to reverse along a spur between the S&amp D main line and the east-west S&amp SWR main line. The throughout journey time for ordinary passenger trains was typically 4 hours, although the limited-stop holiday expresses managed it in 2 hours. Much of the S&amp D was single-track, but the main line was double-track from Midford to Templecombe, and from Blandford to Corfe-Mullen. Crossing trains on the single-line sections always added operational interest to the line, but the focus was the quirky operation of trains calling at Templecombe. These had to reverse from Templecombe Station to Templecombe Junction. The station pilot at Templecombe was kept busy with these evolutions and the light engine movements associated with them. In at least one case, a northbound train set back onto a southbound train at Templecombe Junction, to be pulled into the station by the southbound train engine. After station duties, the equipage was pulled back to the junction by the northbound train engine, and the two trains were then uncoupled to continue on the separate ways.